All right, so what we got in the vise today is we got a super small little bitty bluegill jig. I got an order of these coming up, so you kind of get a few painted to see how they're going to tie, see how they're going to work out. But what we have in the vise is a 1/32 ounce round ball jig head with a number 8 J hook. And you can see that is a super tiny jig. Just the hook shank, just almost about the same length as my fingernail. From tip of the jig head to the tip of the hook to the hook bend, you're talking less than 3/4 of an inch. Super small, tiny little jig. And like I said, these are going to be tied up specifically for bluegill fishing. And what we're going to do is we're going to make one flashy, and we're going to make one not quite so flashy, kind of more of a natural color. But we're going to be tying in some pretty simple materials. And if you're tying any kind of jigs at all, you will have most of these materials. So we're going to start this jig out just like we do all of them. We're going to put a little bit of a glue base on it. And these are going to be very effective in small water. You know, I'm talking like 3, 4, 5 foot. You got the patience for it to go all the way down to the bottom. You can fish it, you know, definitely deeper than that, but it's going to be a really small jig. So we're starting out with a really thin 36 denier maroon colored thread, which is going to match that head in some of the spots. We've painted this head candy lime and candy apple candy red, I think. Not candy apple red, but just candy red. We're going to cut our tag end off, and we're going to put the flash in first. And we have got a little bit of red flash and some green flash we are going to add to this jig. And we're going to be careful, and we're going to pay attention to not over bulking what we got in the shank of the hook. So we're going to be careful not to get this jig built up too heavy. We're going to tie that in. Not super tight. We're, you know, being conscious of how it's actually laying, because that flash isn't just going to be our flash, but it's also going to be our tail material. So we got a little bit of red tied into the bottom of it, and we're going to tie a little bit of green in there with it. And these are super simple jigs. They're pretty fast to tie, so that's why we're going to do 2 on this video. We're going to rotate it. We're going to stand it up, and we're going to put in, I don't know if I can find it here, some green flash on top of that. We lay our flash in there at a 45-degree angle, our tail material. And we're going to pay just enough attention to try to get it to tie right in the middle of that hook. So that way we know we're even on both sides of it. We're going to rotate it back over, and we're going to go back up. Now we're going to take that jig and we're going to pop it back out, and we're going to pull that tail material out to make sure we're kind of even. And if you don't want to make it to where it's even, leave it like this. But we're going to trim the excess of that tail off. So that's what we got. And you can almost stop at that jig just like this since you're bluegill fishing with it. That, you know, more than enough to get a bluegill's attention, even a crappie's attention. You know, by no means is this only for bluegill. But if you're going to tie you up a bluegill arsenal, this is a good jig, type of jig to have in it. Like I said, right there, you can stop at that. We got a real small, fine, sparkly chartreuse fluorescent green chenille we're going to tie in that. We're going to start it right there at the head. We'll wrap it in. We're going to come all the way back up to the head of the jig. We'll stop right there, and we are going to get everything situated because I'm on the other side of the camera. And we're going to go ahead and wrap that in. And this really isn't a chenille, it's a tubing material. But we are going to definitely be using it as a chenille. It'll work for what we're doing with it. We'll wrap it again. We're going to get it over on the other side of that, of our thread. And we're going to tie it in. Pull it back over. tie it in again. Sorry if the camera's a little bit shaky. I don't usually tie from this angle, but to get a good enough focus on it, I need to be tying from this angle. And that way you're also getting the exact same side I'm tying from. So if you're trying to imitate this, it's a little bit easier to see where I'm at, where I'm coming from. And we got that nice little red collar on it, right there at the base of the head. Trim it off, and there you go. Gonna put a little bit of Sally Hansen's on it right up there to dry it. We'll let it run down inside that knot. A little bit right there on the thread. And we're gonna hang it up and let it dry. And that's what we got. Next one, we're gonna do just about almost the exact same thing. Pop that out, we're gonna hang it up, let that dry. And this one here, we've got the exact same jig head, number 8, 1/32 ounce round ball. My paint got a little melty on this one. It didn't, kind of got a little thick right there on the end, but we're not gonna let it go to waste. We're gonna use that. We're not throwing it back. It's a bluegill jig. A bluegill jig don't really care how perfectly shaped that head is, so neither do I. Okay, on this one here, we are going to, it's going to be a little, not quite as bright. It's going to be kind of bright, but when you get to this, you can go to, you know, natural colors, brown feathers, brown rubber material, you know, you name it. Don't tie just because that's the only way I said I'm tying this. You know, you put into it what you want to put into it. But we're going to use a chartreuse green thread, tie it all the way to the head, cut your tag end off. And on this one, we're going to be using a kind of like a lime green flash. And even though you buy this material for flash, that's not all you have to use it for. You know, you can use this flash as tail material too, because you know, if you're buying these materials, you know the flash is fairly cheap compared to feather, you know, hackle and all that. Don't be afraid to use that flash as a tail material. It's awesome. It makes a great tail material. So we're gonna push that down around the shank of that hook, and then we're gonna start cinching it up with that thread. You see how the whole thing is kind of spinning? That's letting me also make sure I've got it on both sides of that hook. And we're going to end up adding a little bit more to this one. And then when you go back up toward the head, that's going to be that's going to be where you're going to tighten it down at. Let's go back down because we got a little bit of room in this head. That's a pretty fine thread. And let's taper up the neck just a little bit. So when I taper up the neck, you know, I'm doing extra wraps up by the head, and then I'm going to build it back down. Then I'm going to go back up, and I'm going to put in a little bit more tail material with it. I'm going to trim that off and make it a little bit shorter, because everybody knows how a bluegill's going to nip that tail. Without a doubt, he's going to be nipping on it. And we're going to add just a little bit of gold flash up here to the top of it. And that's just going to kind of set that jig off just a little bit more, but still holding on to some of our natural colors that I'm looking for in this jig. Going to put it down on there at a 45-degree angle. Pay attention to where that hook's at. This is where it's going to get kind of iffy, and you end up having to get a hook out of your finger while you're tying this jig as well. There's a couple of them there I missed. There's a couple of them there that are trying to get away. We're going to pull it like that, and you notice we got some more hanging out of that neck. It's not neat. It's not even, but we're going to fix that. All right, so I didn't, for video purposes, I cut that flash just a little bit longer than what I probably should have. I could have saved quite a bit there, but I'm not really all that worried about it. We're gonna trim it up, and we've got all these loose spots coming through here with our thread. When we go back up, we're gonna cover all that back up. So, you know, to help yourself out, get all that tail material pulled back up. Keep it kind of nice and tight. Back down to the end and then come back up. See how we're starting to cover up all those loose ends? All the way back down. Come all the way back up again if you have to. We still got room in this jig head. We can build up a little bit more if we need to. Come back up and let's do that. Start working on that tapered neck. And it's just extra wraps there. Fewer wraps down here. Let's rotate it, make sure we got it all covered the way we want it. Look at that, covered pretty nice. All right, so we're gonna come back up here and taper our head. We're gonna find a whip finish tool. You're gonna whip finish it, and we're gonna try to keep that whip finish knot on that tapered neck, up on the very top of that. So bring it up. Just let it keep building up, pull it up against that jig head, let that jig head, let it slide back down. It's gonna follow the contour of that jig head. And then we're gonna pop that loose. And we're gonna pull that out. Okay, our next step, we're gonna cut off our tag end. And when you get to here, you know, it's up to you. Do you wanna use the resin coat? Do you wanna use the Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails? Do you wanna leave it just like it is? You got plenty of options right here, but I'm gonna go with the UV resin coat on this. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do the whole head. And then we're gonna do the neck of that jig. And I'm gonna get that bubble going. I'm gonna get it pretty thick. Then we're gonna let it sit right there. And what I'm doing is I'm letting that UV resin run down that back side and run down that front side. Instead of brushing more back on it, we're gonna utilize what we just put on. So we're gonna rotate it. We're gonna kind of look at it real close to make sure we got it all covered. And it looks like we do. And once we get it to where it's all covered, we are now gonna take our UV light. See how you can see the UV resin here? But you can't when the light's on it. Take the UV light off of it, you don't see that. Perfect little bluegill jigs. That 1/32 number 8 hook makes the perfect little bluegill jig, or even a crappie jig. You know, you're using one as a trailer. You know, you got a heavier one down here on the bottom, a 1/16 ounce, an 1/8 ounce. Run this 1/32 a foot up above it. You know, just kind of a teaser jig. But that's what we got. And like I said, we've done this with pretty simple materials, pretty cheap materials. Our flash, you know, what you know by now is most of this flash here you can get off Amazon. You can pick it up at Plateau Flash Shop. Maybe you might be able to find it at Bass Pro on a good day. But it's all right there. It's cheap, it's easy. And out of a pack of that flash, you know, how many jigs are you gonna make out of that? Well over 200 probably. You know, we only used 1.25 inches worth of material out of this to come up with that. So don't limit yourself to just, you know, you gotta have this for crappie, you gotta have this for bluegill. You know, blend them together, make them work. You can use them for both. You might just have to downsize your jig heads a little bit. That is all I got, but I just wanted to show everybody how I do simple little bluegill jigs using the material that I've already got. And super effective, flashy, not too flashy. You know, and it depends on, you know, how much you want to do on how flashy you can get. Think outside the box, be creative with your jigs. Be creative with your material. Be creative with the material you find. You know, you'll come out with jigs that are, you know, probably a whole lot better than this. But that's all I got. If you don't mind, like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Send me a message. Until next time, I will see you guys later.